So I just finished reading this fascinating book. I'd heard a couple people mention it, and it had been on the list of books I had wanted to read for quite a while. The Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now, he was a psychiatrist who went through the Holocaust, and he wrote a book about it. He has this particular approach to psychology that we'll talk about in a minute. That's in rather stark contrast to Freudianism and some other schools. So he kind of talks about his experiences in a very cold, clinical, detached way. In fact, later on in life, from my understanding, even though he was a fairly devout Jew in private, he deliberately avoided talking about it in public because he didn't want that to color the way people interpreted his psychiatry. He didn't want people to say, oh, that guy is a religious Jew. That means we have to dismiss everything he says, kind of in the same way people dismiss some things Christian scientists say. So, I mean, that makes sense. So, A Man's Search for Meaning deals with a unique form of psychiatry that Viktor Frankl developed after World War II in his time in the concentration camps. It's kind of based off of existentialism and I guess kind of a rejection of kind of the materialist reductionism present in a lot of forms of psychiatry. His form of therapy is called logotherapy, which is a form of existential analysis. So the core of Viktor Frankl's, I guess you could say, entire worldview is that what defines people is what meaning they ascribe to things. Because that's kind of what existentialism was founded out of, the idea that life is about a search for meaning. It depends on the form of existentialism. In Christian existentialism, man kind of goes through a quest where he doubts everything, he doesn't really find any ultimate meaning in the world, and then eventually this leads him to God. In some forms of existentialism, like absurdism, this leads to the belief that life is inherently meaningless and nothing has a purpose or anything. In other forms of existentialism, you take the view that you just have to arbitrarily ascribe things. So Viktor Frankl's view is more along the lines of there is an objective, greater meaning, which he calls any number of different things, because once again, he doesn't want to make it kind of a particularist religious doctrine. He says God or love or your family or whatever, but people have higher desires, higher ideals, and only kind of by sticking to these can man kind of be healthy and happy. He viewed happiness and I guess kind of endurance as the endurance in the face of hardship as being the ability to always find meaning in your surroundings. So this is a little difficult to cover, so let's just kind of get through the book a bit. So he describes his time in a concentration camp and kind of the horrifying conditions there. And he kind of, like I said, he was a psychiatrist and a surgeon before the war. And so he did a combination of, I guess, kind of standard labor, digging trenches, that kind of thing. He eventually also went on to serve as a doctor for some of the other prisoners. So he kind of started doing psychological profiles of the types of people who would survive longer in the camps. Interestingly, he found people who were not physically strong, but were intellectual or spiritual or had some sort of better education tended to last longer. People who were very strong and very healthy, but were kind of either materialistic or not particularly educated or religious, were the ones who tended to die faster. So he noticed this, and kind of as things went along, he found that the people who lasted the longest were the ones who could keep ascribing meaning to their suffering. Now, there's a lot of different ways of kind of ascribing meaning to suffering. From a Christian perspective, we continue to endure. Perhaps another way to say meaning is purpose, because he said the people who tended to last the longest had some purpose, and when he was helping other people to not to give into despair, he would say things like, "You have a wife, you have children, you have to keep living for them," or it's against your religion, it's against who you are as a person to kill yourself and give up. And he found so long as people believed they had a responsibility or a dependency on something greater than themselves, they were able to continue on regardless. He found that even in the worst of conditions, people could still be happy, people could always endure, so long as, I guess kind of in an existentialist terms, they call it saying yes to life. So long as people could consciously continue to ascribe meaning to their surroundings and meaning to their circumstances, then they could continue to exist and kind of continue to go on. And I just like to say, unlike some existentialists, Viktor Frankl is not a cynic. By ascribing meaning, he doesn't mean make things up. He certainly doesn't take that perspective. He even goes on to say that man's desire for meaning is kind of inbuilt into his nature. It's natural, and it's a good thing to feel it. It's not just a self-delusion. On the topic of kind of freedom and existentialism and kind of the freedom to choose, etc., he clarified his views on freedom, saying, "Freedom, however, is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. In fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. That is why I recommend that the Statue of Liberty be on the East Coast, be removed and supplemented. That's why I recommend the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast." And I guess that kind of clarifies a bit what he's trying to say. He says you have the freedom to choose life and you have the freedom to choose meaning, you also have the responsibility to it. Whereas, like some absurdists would say, it doesn't make an objective difference whether you choose to be a nihilist or choose not to be. He believes that you have a moral responsibility to choose meaning, and you have a moral responsibility to devote yourself to something. In kind of his logotherapy, he attempts to treat people's psychological problems by using the meaning method. One of the examples he gives was a man who suffered incredible neuroses and stress in his life. Upon talking to the man, he found out that he was a diplomat who was having to defend the positions of the U.S. government at a time when he really disagreed with them. So his advice to the man was to find another line of work, and that his depression was not physical in cause, nor was he even really ill. It came from having a lack of purpose or serving a purpose that he was against. He also had to deal with, I think this is probably the best example of ascribing meaning to suffering. There was a woman who basically wanted to commit suicide because she had a severely disabled son, and she couldn't deal with it anymore. And he sat her down and he told her basically that her suffering had given her son, who in a previous era would have been thrown off the rocks and abandoned to the wolves, the best life he could possibly have. And she came to understand that her suffering and her hardship and her sacrifices had a purpose. They had a purpose, and they helped her son. And she was able to kind of be at peace then. And it cured her more or less. And he also takes the perspective that maintaining your purpose is more important than pretty much anything else. Like an example he gives is When he was at the camp, someone broke into the storehouse and stole some potatoes. The SS found out about it, and they told the camp, either you give the man up or we're going to withhold food for a couple days. Out of the 5,000 people who were already starving, no one would give the man up. Because at that point in time, all they had left is their dignity. All they had left was kind of their moral fortitude, I suppose you could say. And this is, just going back to Christianity a bit, this is, you often hear of, I think this kind of explains martyrdom to a certain extent. Actually, sorry, before we cover that, let's just cover depression quickly. So he talks a fair bit about depression, and he says depression, generally speaking, comes about when people can't ascribe meaning to their suffering. Indeed, he sees a lot of psychological conditions as stemming from people being unable to ascribe meaning to things. Like in the case of my mother, for instance, she feels that by kind of staying home and being a housewife and raising my sister and me, her life has no meaning. That because she didn't have a big career, that her sacrifices are worthless. And she's depressed as a result of that. And Viktor Frankl would probably say, look, you raise two healthy children who will contribute to society. Your life has meaning. And people need to feel that the hardship they go through has meaning. And he said part of the big problem and why depression's increased is modern society takes the perspective that suffering is something that doesn't exist and suffering is something that's always bad. But more than that, if anyone, that all kind of sorrow and all sadness is inherently meaningless. I know when I was growing up, if I expressed sorrow, people would tell me, Argy, lighten up. Argent, you can't be depressed. It's bad. And basically what the attitude is if people express negative emotions, they're guilted for it. So not only are they told that their sorrow has no meaning, they're told that by actively kind of existing, they're a detriment to the world. And people who feel not only that they have no meaning to their life, but they're also a detriment to the world, are the people who are most likely to commit suicide. Let's see here. So along with the whole concept of meaning, Viktor Frankl states that part of meaning is having a future. Humanity is inherently future-oriented. It kind of reminds me of what Quaru says in Evangelion. You humans have the future, it is what you live for. Humans are a future-oriented species, and unless we have some hope of something for the future, we don't really have meaning in living to see the future. And he said people in the camps who wouldn't continue what he would call tragic optimism were also the ones who died. They would just lay down and wait for the end to take them. Whereas the people who still held out some sort of hope would not make it out. He describes one man who couldn't take it anymore, and he had like a hallucination or something that said he was going to get out of the camps on March the 30th. And when March the 30th came up and the camp wasn't liberated, he succumbed to a typhoid infection because he no longer had any hope for the future. So hope for the future in Viktor Frankl's case was, and what most of the men did was, there was religion, yes, but there was also their families. So he would just focus entirely on the image of his wife. He would talk to it, he would tell her how much he loved her, how he wanted nothing more than to be with her again. And that provided purpose with him. His love for another person kind of completed him. And he did other things. He tended to the sick. He tried to provide psychological care for those around him. And he said that was kind of what enabled him to endure. It enabled him to maintain his self-image. So This is a passage he wrote about it that I thought was rather beautiful. A thought transfixed me. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it was said into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers. The truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world may still know bliss, be it only for a moment, in the contemplation of his beloved, in a position of utter desolation when men cannot express himself in positive action, when his only achievement may consist in enduring his sufferings in the right way, an honorable way. In such a position, man can, through loving contemplation of the image he carries of his beloved, achieve fulfillment. For the first time in my life, I was able to understand the meaning of the words. The angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of an infinite glory. And I think it brings it back, even though Viktor Frankl is Jewish, I think it really spoke to me kind of as a Christian. First off, I think it really explains the concept of martyrdom. And I'm going to just talk about Christian martyrdom, but it also applies to Islamic. The first is, in people who I guess don't have that type of meaning don't understand how people can do it. People could, and the Romans couldn't understand why these Christians were willing to let the lions eat them, while they were willing to just die rather than change their mind. And I guess kind of in this way it explains it. Firstly, by kind of repenting and recanting, they would be destroying their self-image. They would be committing an action that is so against their persona and their essence that it would shatter it, and it would depersonalize them. Also, it would rob them of their sense of meaning. You see, by dying for Christ, there is meaning in that. They believe that Christ loves them, that Christ appreciates this, that there is glory in this. And that meaning is more important than life and death. It's why soldiers will go into battle. It's why women will throw themselves in front of a truck to save their child. Meaning is more important to humanity than the survival instinct is. So in that case, the people are filled with meaning. They're filled with meaning to the point that even when they're being burned, even when beasts are tearing them apart, they can stand there serenely. There's also a hope of a future, a hope of an eternal future. The Christian believes that should he die, should the animal consume him, he will go to be with his God. And that allows him to endure pretty much any suffering. It is kind of a locust in the center of you that can never be taken away. It's kind of different than worldly things. I think that's kind of what he's saying there at the end, is if you are a believer, if you believe in God, if you believe in the transcendent, that cannot be taken away from you. You will always have your love for God, and he will always love you, and thus you will always have purpose. And you can really see this in Revelation, because Christ says, "For what you were about to suffer, do not be afraid." The devil will throw you into jail, people will hate you, they will take things from you. But if you confess my name in life, then I will confess your name before my Father. That is, regardless of what the world does to you, I will love you. I will always be there with you. So long as you keep me in your heart, I will keep you in mine, and you will always have meaning. And you will always have a purpose to exist. And I think I think this is kind of when people say God is love, it's often kind of flippant, but I think in a really real sense he is, because he is unconditional love for all of us. And since love is meaning, God is unconditional meaning for all of us. So I think to a certain extent that's kind of relates back to, ironically enough, the Logos and the incarnation of Christ. Christ being God coming to us in the form of a human and dying on our behalf is an infinite act of love. It's an infinite act of love, and it provides both purpose and hope to all of us. It provides the hope of our salvation, the hope of the resurrection, the hope that we can be reconciled to the Creator. And once reconciled to Him, we can dwell in His eternal glory for all time. And it will permanently kind of fulfill our need for meaning. So what he views, I guess that's kind of, in short, kind of what Viktor Frankl says, that what people need in order to be healthy, what people need in order to exist is purpose. And purpose comes in a variety of forms: religious, personal, professional, etc. He says at various points in time, what he said is, I'm a psychiatrist, I have to survive this and get out of here so I can publish my psychological theory. I have a duty to the world and to my colleagues to publish it. And that was able to help him survive. So what else does this mean for kind of the treatment of mental illness? Basically, his view was, and I've read this in other places, one of the things that depression does, and what depression really does, is it shortens it dramatically raises your time preference. Excuse me, if we can use another term. That is, depression prevents you from seeing the future. Because if you are completely stuck 100% in the present, you just won't have anything to look forward to. Depression, why it's so bad is it doesn't let you see past your current situation. You can't say, oh, things will get better. Oh, I still have this. It completely kind of puts a wall between yourself and the world, and often a wall between you and God, or you and your wife, or you and your purpose. And that's why it's so devastating, and that's why it often leads to people to kill themselves, because people kill themselves when they believe that there is no meaning and that they'll never have meaning again. And that's also kind of how neuroses work. Neuroses serve to kind of separate people from meaning. Anxiety, self-hatred, self-doubt, all these things prevent you from feeling meaning or feel that you're not worthy of your meaning. So that is a bit of an overview of it. Obviously, it's a very big topic. It's like trying to describe Freud in 20 minutes. What kind of makes Viktor Frankl different is he has a very positive view of religion. He views it as a really good thing. He also doesn't think everything comes from, I guess he's kind of a humanist in a sense. He thinks things come from kind of the whole of the human person, and from that person's unique search, rather than Freud, who just thought everything was done as a result of something that happened to them as a child. He saw it more as an issue with how people perceive themselves, or people's inability or unwillingness to say yes to life and to accept kind of the meaning that the world or God has placed upon them. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I highly recommend you read this book for yourself. It's not too long. It's available on Audible. There's a new and updated version which contains a bunch of stuff on the practical aspects of logotherapy. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys later.